Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member? No names, just yes or no.
That moment when your phone suddenly lights up with a barrage of family messages that should have filled you with joy but instead delivers a crushing blow straight to the heart. Especially when those notifications reveal an elaborate wedding plan orchestrated by your own sister without a single trace of your name on the guest list, is the kind of twist that reshapes everything you thought you knew about loyalty and belonging in a family that has always teetered on the edge of favoritism and unspoken resentments. I remember it vividly, sitting in my Chicago apartment on what started as an ordinary Tuesday morning. My coffee still steaming on the kitchen counter as I scrolled through the group chat that included distant aunts from Florida and cousins I barely recognized from holiday cards, all buzzing with excitement over Sarah's impending nuptials in Napa Valley. A $750,000 extravaganza complete with private jets for out-of-town guests, a custom-designed gown that could grace the pages of any bridal magazine, and a reception venue sprawling across vineyards that promised sunsets more picturesque than anything I'd seen in my own modest travels. Yet amid the flurry of flight bookings and hotel reservations, my name, Emily Harper, the reliable older sister who has spent years building a stable career in marketing while supporting the family through every crisis, did not appear even once. Not in the save-the-date details or the itinerary for the rehearsal dinner, leaving me to stare at the screen in a haze of disbelief that quickly curdled into a sharp, burning anger fueled by years of being the one who faded into the background while Sarah, the younger golden child with her influencer lifestyle and endless spotlight, commanded every ounce of attention from our parents. The realization hit me harder than the winter winds whipping through the city streets outside my window, prompting me to replay old conversations in my mind where Mom, Linda, had always defended Sarah's whims with that weary sigh she reserved for anything that disrupted the family harmony she so desperately curated, often at the expense of acknowledging my own achievements like the promotion I'd earned just months earlier after pulling all-nighters on client pitches that kept our household afloat during Dad's rough patches. I fired off a tentative message to Dad, Robert, seeking some reassurance that this was all a mix-up or perhaps a delayed invitation lost in the mail, but his reply came back in that characteristically vague manner of his, suggesting I discuss it directly with Mom because he hated getting caught in the middle of what he called sister stuff, which only amplified the sting as I imagined him sitting in their suburban home, probably nodding along to Sarah's plans, without a second thought to how this exclusion would land on me. By midday, the full scope of the event unfolded in the chat threads, detailing everything from the celebrity officiant flown in from Los Angeles to the fireworks display that would light up the night sky after a multi-course meal prepared by a Michelin-starred chef. All while I pieced together the glaring omission that felt less like an oversight and more like a deliberate erasure, especially when Mom's voicemail arrived shortly after, her voice laced with that familiar mix of defensiveness and faux concern as she explained that they had chosen to limit the guest list to avoid any potential drama, implying in no uncertain terms that my presence might somehow make the day about myself, with my tendency to speak up when things felt unfair, a trait she had long viewed as disruptive rather than the honest backbone it truly represented. That explanation, delivered over a crackling phone line while I paced my living room with the skyline mocking my isolation through the floor-to-ceiling windows, ignited a firestorm of emotions that ranged from heartbroken betrayal to a simmering resolve to reclaim some agency in this narrative they were writing without me. Because if Sarah could orchestrate a wedding that excluded her own flesh and blood for the sake of her polished image, then perhaps it was time for me to craft a response that matched her flair for the dramatic but on my own uninvited terms. Unable to shake the rage that had settled in my chest like an uninvited guest at a party already overcrowded with slights, I turned to the digital underbelly of wedding forums where anonymous users traded stories of familial exclusions and petty revenges, creating a throwaway account to post a series of veiled allusions to a lavish Napa affair marred by selective blindness towards certain family members, crafting the words with just enough specificity to pique curiosity among those in Sarah's social orbit. Mentions of vineyards and high-dollar budgets intertwined with hints of sibling jealousy that would undoubtedly circulate back to her circle without ever directly naming names. As the post gained traction throughout the afternoon, drawing comments from strangers who shared their own tales of being sidelined at milestone events and speculating wildly about the bride's motives, a small but intoxicating sense of empowerment washed over me. The kind that comes from turning pain into a subtle weapon that could disrupt their perfect facade from afar, even as I wondered if this initial jab would invite retaliation or simply fade into the noise of online chatter. By evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across my apartment, the weight of the day's revelations pressed down harder. Mingling the thrill of my anonymous strike with a deeper uncertainty about the fractures this snub had exposed in our family ties that stretched back to childhood summers spent competing for Mom's approval amid Dad's quiet detachment, making me question whether Sarah's decision stemmed from genuine fear of my influence or something more insidious, buried in our shared history. Pouring myself a generous glass of red wine to dull the edges of the hurt, I refreshed the forum one last time to see the thread swelling with over 50 responses, each one validating the injustice in ways that bolstered my spirits unexpectedly. But just as I set the phone down, an email notification chimed from an unknown sender with a subject line that sent a chill racing down my spine. "You're not the only one they've hidden from. Ready for the truth behind the wedding veil." As I hesitated with my finger over the open button, heart pounding with a mix of dread and intrigue, the implications swirled in my mind like the wine in my glass, hinting at layers of deception that could upend everything and propel me toward a path of reckoning I hadn't fully anticipated. Opening that email from the mysterious sender late into the night after the initial shock of my exclusion had settled into a restless determination to uncover the undercurrents of this family betrayal felt like peeling back the layers of an onion that promised tears, but delivered revelations sharp enough to cut through years of overlooked slights, especially when the words on the screen revealed Cousin Mia as the source, the understated relative who had always lingered on the periphery of our gatherings with her keen eye for the unspoken tensions that Mom tried so hard to gloss over with platitudes about unity and moving forward. Mia's message unfolded in meticulous detail, attaching threads of text exchanges between Sarah and Mom that painted a picture of calculated exclusion rooted not just in vague fears of drama, but in Sarah's explicit request to streamline the guest list for what she termed optimal vibes, a euphemism for ensuring that my recent professional successes, such as the marketing campaign I'd led that went viral in industry circles, wouldn't overshadow her moment in the Napa spotlight where every detail from the floral installations to the celebrity playlist was designed to feed her influencer persona. Reading those snippets while the city lights flickered outside my window stirred a cocktail of validation and fury within me, because there it was in black and white, Sarah admitting to Mom that inviting me might invite comparisons she wasn't ready to face, especially since my life in Chicago had evolved into something self-sufficient and unapologetic, free from the performative glamour that defined her world, and this confirmation transformed the snub from a possible oversight into a premeditated act that demanded a response as layered and intentional as the wedding itself. The following morning, still buzzing from the late-night discovery and the anonymous forum post that had quietly amassed a following of sympathetic commenters sharing their own tales of familial oversights at milestone events, I mustered the courage to dial Mom directly, bracing for the conversation that had loomed like a storm cloud since her voicemail excuse about avoiding my potential to make the day about myself, a phrase that now rang hollow against the evidence of Sarah's influence in the decision-making process. Our call stretched into an hour of tense back and forth, where Mom initially deflected with stories of logistical nightmares like venue capacity limits and budget constraints for the $750,000 spectacle that included helicopter arrivals for VIPs and a live band imported from Austin, but under my persistent probing, she eventually conceded fragments of the truth, admitting in a voice tinged with defensiveness that Sarah had voiced concerns about old rivalries resurfacing, referencing a long-ago incident at a family birthday where my announcement of a career breakthrough had shifted the focus, an event Mom framed as me being overly enthusiastic rather than rightfully proud. which only deepened the rift as I countered that true family support shouldn't come with asterisks or exclusions based on who might shine a bit too brightly. Dad joined midway on the line, his intervention as measured and non-committal as ever, urging me to consider the bigger picture of Sarah's happiness while hinting at underlying stresses like the rising costs of the event that had them dipping into savings they hadn't planned to touch. A revelation that added a financial dimension to the conflict and made me wonder if my absence was less about personality clashes and more about preserving a facade of abundance amid their tightening circumstances. That partial admission from Mom, coupled with Dad's evasive pleas for harmony, left me grappling with a dilemma that tugged at the edges of my resolve, because while part of me wanted to storm ahead with more anonymous jabs to expose the hypocrisy, another voice whispered about the cost to our already fragile bonds, especially when Mia followed up her email with a private call where she elaborated on her role as the reluctant whistleblower, explaining how she'd overheard Sarah's directives during a planning session and felt compelled to intervene after years of watching me shoulder the emotional labor of family obligations without reciprocal acknowledgement. Mia's insights carried a touch of wry humor as she described the wedding preparations unfolding like a reality show scripted for maximum drama, with Sarah micromanaging every element from the custom invitations embossed in gold to the eco-friendly favors that screamed performative virtue, and in that shared laughter over the phone I found an unexpected ally who encouraged me not to back down but to channel the hurt into something transformative, her words igniting the spark for a counter-narrative that would flip the script on their exclusion. Emboldened by this hidden alliance, I crafted my next act of reprisal with careful precision, generating a fabricated RSVP from a disposable email address masquerading as a far-flung relative eager to attend with a professional photographer companion who promised to document the unforgettable opulence for a feature spread, ensuring the confirmation included just enough embellished enthusiasm to infiltrate their planning database and sow subtle discord among the coordinators already stretched thin by the event scale, a move that brought a satisfying chuckle as I imagined the ripple effects of added headcounts and last-minute adjustments disrupting Sarah's meticulously curated timeline without ever revealing my hand. As the week wore on with work deadlines providing a temporary distraction from the emotional undercurrents of the unfolding family saga, the fake RSVP's impact began to surface indirectly through snippets Mia relayed about frantic emails circulating in the wedding party group, confirming that my ploy had landed just as intended and injecting a dose of petty justice into the mix that made the initial snub feel marginally less suffocating, though it also amplified the uncertainty about how far I was willing to push this path of quiet retaliation before it crossed into territory that might alienate even my newfound confidant. Evenings found me scrolling through travel sites late into the night, the glow of the screen illuminating possibilities that had started as fleeting daydreams but now coalesced into a bold vision of seizing control by orchestrating my own ceremony in a place as iconic and unassailable as Paris, where the romance of the city could serve as the perfect antidote to Napa's contrived grandeur, a secret plan that promised not just personal fulfillment but a poetic overshadowing of their event on a scale they couldn't ignore. Yet just as I hovered over the button to book an exploratory flight, my phone vibrated with an incoming call from Sarah herself, her tone laced with accusation and a hint of vulnerability that caught me off guard. Demanding answers about the online whispers and the RSVP anomaly that had her team in a tizzy, what exactly had she pieced together? And how would this direct confrontation force my hand toward decisions that could either mend or shatter the fragile threads of our sibling connection forever? Answering Sarah's unexpected call in the dim light of my apartment late that evening after the fake RSVP had begun its subtle work of disruption felt like stepping into a minefield disguised as a sibling heart-to-heart, her voice crackling through the line with a blend of indignation and something almost pleading that made me pause mid-stride across the living room floor, as she launched into accusations about the online forum post and the phantom attendee confirmation that had her wedding planners scrambling to verify guest credentials amid the already overwhelming logistics of a $750,000 event teeming with high-profile attendees, and bespoke elements like personalized wine labels for each table setting. I played it cool at first, feigning confusion while my mind raced through the possible connections she might have drawn between the anonymous hints I'd scattered and the ripples they were causing in her carefully constructed bubble. But as she pressed on about how someone close was trying to undermine her big day out of jealousy over her success as an influencer whose sponsored posts funded much of the extravagance, the conversation veered into territory that exposed the raw underbelly of our rivalry. With her admitting in a rare moment of candor that excluding me wasn't entirely her call, but a compromise to keep Mom from unraveling under the pressure of coordinating such an immense affair while hiding the family's financial tightrope from prying eyes. That admission hung in the air like smoke from a just-extinguished fire, stirring a whirlwind of emotions in me, because while it offered a sliver of understanding for the snub, it also highlighted how Sarah had prioritized her image over our bond. A choice that resonated with the quiet resentments I'd harbored since our teenage years when her charisma always seemed to eclipse my steadier path, and as the call ended with her warning me to stay out of it if I valued what was left of our relationship, I found myself staring at the travel app on my phone with renewed purpose, deciding that the only way to counter this erasure was to forge ahead with a reconnaissance trip to Paris that would lay the groundwork for an elopement bold enough to redefine the narrative on my terms. Boarding the flight from Chicago to Paris the next week carried the weight of that confrontation like an invisible carry-on, the hum of the engines mirroring the persistent buzz in my thoughts as I reviewed venue options on my tablet during the long haul across the Atlantic, envisioning a ceremony that captured the effortless romance of the city. Perhaps a sunset vow exchange on a sane riverboat or an intimate gathering in a hidden garden cafe, far removed from the ostentatious displays Sarah had planned for Napa, where every detail screamed for validation through social media shares rather than genuine connection. Upon landing, the city's charm enveloped me immediately, from the aroma of fresh croissants wafting through the streets to the iconic landmarks that seemed to whisper invitations to start anew, and as I checked into a quaint hotel near the Latin Quarter, the jet lag only amplified the thrill of this secret mission, though it was tempered by a flurry of incoming messages from Mom urging reconciliation through a neutral family Zoom that I dodged with excuses about work deadlines, her pleas laced with guilt over the escalating tensions that had Dad texting separately about how the wedding budget strains were making everyone on edge, a subtle clue to the deeper cracks in their facade that Mia had hinted at during our last check-in. Exploring potential sites that first afternoon brought unexpected humor into the mix, like when a venue coordinator at a charming bistro mistook my inquiries for signs of a spontaneous proposal and launched into animated stories of couples who'd tied the knot amid mishaps, such as rain-soaked vows or lost rings tumbling into fountains. His enthusiastic French accent turning what could have been awkward solo scouting into light-hearted anecdotes that eased the loneliness of traveling alone and reminded me why this act of self-assertion felt so liberating, even as I snapped discreet photos and noted details that would make my event intimate yet unforgettable. Back in my room that evening, the moral quandaries surfaced more insistently as I debated the next layer of reprisal, ultimately deciding to reach out to a contact in the lifestyle blogging world with a tip about insider scoops on an upcoming Napa wedding involving over-the-top elements like drone light shows and celebrity toasts that bordered on excess, altering just enough facts to imply financial recklessness without direct slander, a choice that provided a rush of satisfaction when the piece published the next day and began circulating in circles overlapping with Sarah's followers, drawing speculative comments about the drama behind the dollars. That made me cringe inwardly at the ethical gray area I'd entered, but also fueled my determination to match her visibility with authenticity. For a more personal touch of revenge, I arranged the anonymous return of a lavish bridesmaid gift package that had been mistakenly addressed to my old apartment months earlier, consisting of monogrammed robes and crystal flutes engraved with Sarah's initials, complete with a neutral note suggesting it might better suit a simpler celebration. ensuring the shipment looped back through their vendor network to create logistical headaches without any traceable link to me. A witty disruption that had Mia texting updates about the confusion it sparked during a fitting session. Her reports bringing a smirk to my face as I wandered the Louvre the following day, absorbing the art that spoke to themes of triumph over adversity in ways that mirrored my own evolving story. Yet amid these small victories, the trip unearthed subtle clues that deepened the uncertainty, such as an overheard conversation in a cafe between two American tourists gossiping about a family feud tied to a high-profile Napa event, hinting that word of our rift was spreading beyond what I'd anticipated. And as I prepared to extend my stay for one more venue visit, another twist arrived via a voicemail from Sarah, her tone uncharacteristically fragile as she alluded to a shared childhood secret involving the heirloom necklace Mom had favored her with, something from back then that explained the exclusion more profoundly than jealousy alone. What buried truth was she finally willing to unearth, and how would it force me to reassess the revenge I'd so carefully plotted while half a world away from the family chaos? Returning from Paris with a suitcase full of venue brochures and a head swirling with the voicemail Sarah had left just before my flight departed, her words lingering like an unresolved chord in a song I couldn't quite place. Felt like re-entering a pressure chamber where the air back in Chicago carried the familiar weight of family expectations laced with the unspoken accusations that had simmered since her hints about our shared childhood secret tied to the heirloom necklace Mom had bestowed upon her as a wedding talisman, a piece of jewelry that symbolized not just favoritism but a deeper fracture from back then that she promised to explain if I agreed to a family sit-down before the Napa festivities consumed everything. The city welcomed me with its relentless pace, the skyline a stark contrast to the romantic haze of the Eiffel Tower views I'd captured on my phone, and as I settled back into my apartment routine of client meetings and evening jogs along the lakefront, the pull toward reconciliation warred with the momentum of my secret elopement plans, especially when Mom followed up Sarah's message with an invitation to a pre-wedding dinner at their suburban home, framing it as a chance to clear the air. Amid the whirlwind of preparations that included finalizing the $750,000 budget allocations for everything from the imported floral arches to the string quartet's travel accommodations, her tone suggesting that my absence from the event was still negotiable if I could promise to play the supportive role without stirring the pot. I accepted the invite despite the knot in my stomach, figuring the gathering would offer insights into the financial undercurrents Mia had alluded to and perhaps force Sarah to elaborate on that cryptic reference to our past. Though part of me relished the opportunity to observe their dynamics up close, armed with the witty retorts that had become my shield against the exclusion sting. Walking through the front door of the family house that evening brought a rush of nostalgia mixed with tension, the scent of Mom's signature roast beef wafting from the kitchen, while Dad greeted me with his usual warm but oblivious embrace, commenting on how refreshed I looked from my trip without pressing for details that might reveal my ulterior motives, as the table was already set with Sarah at the head in a designer sweater that screamed pre-bridal glow, her fiancé Mark beside her, exchanging pleasantries about the vineyard's latest RSVPs that had swelled the guest count to nearly 250 despite the earlier trims. Mom bustled about with plates, steering the conversation towards safe topics like the menu's fusion of California cuisine and family recipes, but the undercurrent of unease surfaced quickly when Sarah caught my eye across the candles, her expression a blend of wariness and resolve that hinted at the voicemail's unfinished business. And as we passed the appetizers, I couldn't resist a light jab about how some heirlooms carry more baggage than sparkle, delivered with a wry smile that earned a sharp intake of breath from Mom and a forced laugh from Dad, who pivoted to tales of his golf game to diffuse the moment. The dinner progressed in fits and starts, with Sarah dominating the anecdotes about her engagement photoshoot in Tuscany and the custom cake tiers flavored with rare imports, but when Mia arrived fashionably late with a bottle of wine as her peace offering, the atmosphere shifted palpably as she took a seat beside me and began weaving in casual observations about the event's scale straining the family's resources, her words prompting Dad to clear his throat uncomfortably before admitting an roundabout way that recent market dips had necessitated some prudent adjustments to the guest list, including my exclusion, not merely for harmony but to mask the fact that the extravagance was propped up by loans and deferred payments. That could unravel if word got out. That revelation hung over the main course like a storm cloud finally breaking, transforming the meal into a charged arena where Sarah defended the choices as essential to her brand's momentum, while Mom interjected with pleas for understanding the pressures of curating a flawless day amid hidden debts that traced back to Dad's ill-advised investments years ago, a twist that made my snub feel like a symptom of broader desperation rather than personal animus, though it only fueled my inner monologue of what the heck kind of family prioritizes fireworks over honesty, especially when Sarah finally broached the necklace topic in a hushed tone during a lull, confessing that back then, during our turbulent teen summers, Mom had used it as a bribe to keep me quiet about a minor car fender bender Dad had covered up to avoid insurance hikes, a secret we'd both internalized as loyalty, but which now justified her favoring Sarah to prevent old wounds from reopening publicly. Viewers might question my restraint in that moment, opting for a measured nod instead of an outburst that could have escalated into full-blown chaos, but holding back allowed me to absorb the layers of deception while plotting my next move. A calculated photo edit of a candid shot from the dinner, Sarah proudly displaying the necklace against the dining room backdrop that I superimposed with faint Paris landmarks in the background before uploading anonymously to a bridal inspiration board with a caption about unexpected horizons stealing the scene, a clever subversion that began circulating among wedding enthusiasts and trickled into shared networks, sowing seeds of confusion and envy without overt confrontation. The satisfaction of watching those shares mount as I drove home under the streetlights mingled with the growing conflict of whether this digital shadowboxing was empowering me or just perpetuating the cycle, particularly when Mia texted a heads-up about the edit sparking questions in Sarah's group chat, but the true cliffhanger crystallized days later as I touched down in Paris for the actual elopement, my heart racing with anticipation for the intimate vows I'd arranged with Alex, only for the officiant to pull me aside moments before the ceremony with news of an last-minute addition to the guest list requested by a family contact who insisted on anonymity. What unforeseen presence from my past was about to intersect with this meticulously planned triumph, and how would it tip the scales of revenge into uncharted emotional territory? Stepping onto that Parisian rooftop as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting a golden hue over the Seine and the distant silhouette of the Eiffel Tower, marked the culmination of my clandestine journey from uninvited sibling to architect of my own unapologetic celebration, where Alex and I stood hand in hand before a small gathering that included only Mia as our witness and a trusted officiant whose calm demeanor contrasted with the whirlwind of emotions churning inside me after the dinner revelations about the family's concealed debts and the necklace's tangled history tied to that long-buried car incident from our teens that had shaped Mom's favoritism in ways I was only beginning to unpack. The ceremony unfolded with a simplicity that felt profoundly luxurious compared to the overproduced spectacle Sarah was orchestrating in Napa. Our vows exchanged amid the soft strains of a violinist playing a melody we'd selected for its understated romance rather than viral potential, and as Alex slipped the ring onto my finger with a grin that spoke volumes about our shared resilience against the family storms, a wave of triumphant vulnerability washed over me, mingled with the humor of imagining Mom's reaction to this impromptu affair that bypassed all the traditions she held sacred, like the multi-tiered cake and tearful toasts she envisioned for Sarah's $750,000 extravaganza now unfolding without my shadow, but perhaps soon eclipsed by mine. The photographer captured every moment with discretion, from the candid laughter during our first dance on the terrace to the way the city lights began to flicker on like stars approving our defiance, and in those instants, the weight of the exclusion lifted just enough to allow genuine joy to seep through the cracks of resentment, though the uncertainty lingered in the back of my mind about the anonymous guest addition that the officiant had mentioned turning out to be a no-show, a phantom request that Mia later speculated might have been Sarah's tentative olive branch gone awry, leaving me to wonder if reconciliation hovered just out of reach or had already slipped away irretrievably. Uploading the photos to my social media that very night from our cozy hotel suite overlooking the Champs-Élysées felt like releasing a carefully bottled storm. The images of us framed against iconic backdrops with captions emphasizing love on our terms. No reservations needed, designed to resonate with the authenticity that Sarah's event so conspicuously lacked, and within hours, the posts began to gain traction far beyond my modest follower count, shares cascading through networks that intersected with wedding enthusiasts, lifestyle influencers, and even mutual acquaintances from the family circle who started flooding my notifications with heart emojis and messages praising the realness of our elopement in contrast to the staged perfection they associated with Napa trends. The viral momentum built exponentially as morning broke over Chicago, with reposts highlighting the effortless elegance of our lace details and sunset vows drawing comparisons that inevitably looped back to Sarah's hype, comments speculating about sibling shade or the uninvited sister's comeback, injecting a layer of schadenfreude that satisfied the revenge itch I'd nurtured since the group chat snub. Yet it also stirred a twinge of discomfort, because while the attention empowered me, it amplified the conflict by pulling unwilling eyes toward our private fractures, making viewers perhaps side with my boldness while questioning if this public pivot crossed into the very attention-seeking Mom had accused me of all along. For the final stroke of witty reprisal, I penned a blog entry that afternoon, framing the Paris chapter as a deliberate choice for joy amid heirlooms of hurt and budgets of illusion. Alluding subtly to the financial secrets and childhood cover-up without naming names, a clever narrative that positioned me as the evolved one rising above the drama and quickly amplified by the photo buzz, circulating through email chains and group texts that Mia confirmed had reached Sarah's reception, where guests whispered about the rival wedding stealing the online thunder just as her fireworks lit the vineyard sky. The fallout arrived in waves as Alex and I strolled hand in hand through Montmartre the next day, Mom's call piercing the Parisian serenity with a torrent of accusations about deliberate upstaging that bordered on betrayal. Her voice cracking with a mix of fury and hurt as she detailed how the viral photos had distracted from Sarah's vows and prompted awkward questions from aunts about our family's unconventional dynamics, while Dad followed with a voicemail that carried his trademark neutrality but underscored the deeper toll of the debts now exposed indirectly through the blog's hints, revealing how the car accident hush-up from years ago had not only strained our sibling bond, but also locked them into a pattern of selective silences that my actions were now shattering wide open. Sarah's response came via text later that evening, a terse message questioning if this had been my plan all along to one-up her happiness, laced with an undercurrent of vulnerability that echoed her dinner confession about the necklace's origins in that teen mishap we'd both witnessed, Dad's fender bender spun into a lie to protect his record, Mom using the heirloom to buy our complicity, and Sarah bearing the guilt of being the favored keeper, leaving me to reply with measured ambiguity that invited more dialogue but committed to none, a choice that might strike audiences as petty withholding rather than graceful closure. As the photos continued to ripple outward, inspiring strangers with tales of their own exclusions while haunting my family notifications with pleas for explanation, the ambiguity settled over me like the evening fog rolling in from the river, prompting endless what-ifs about whether the spotlight triumph had healed the rifts or merely illuminated them for all to see. And in the quiet moments with Alex discussing potential family outreach, I couldn't shake the unanswered questions lingering. Like echoes in the city of lights, had the revenge fortified my independence or fractured the bonds beyond mending, and what hidden truths about Sarah's doubts amid her own marital uncertainties might still surface to redefine everything we'd buried under layers of resentment and revelation.